There's a lot of misinformation floating around right now in Reddit threads, old forums, and pre-law advisors repeating advice from 10 or 15 years ago. And there's one myth in particular causing a lot of unnecessary stress. People will say, if you're taking the LSAT in January, you're too late, you've missed the boat, and that idea is wrong, it's outdated, and it's leading way too many people to panic when they don't need to. So let me say this clearly right at the start. If you're taking the LSAT in January or February, you are not too late for this cycle, not even close. In fact, because of how admissions works now, you're in a much better position than most people think. And I'm going to walk you through exactly why. For many years, for decades, the rule of thumb was you've got to apply early or you're done. And that advice made sense back in 2008. It made sense in 2012, but the world has changed. The LSAT has since moved online. It's offered way more frequently than ever before. Logic games are off the test, affirmative action is banned, and schools are reviewing applications later and more cautiously. And all of these changes pushed the entire admissions timeline back. Committees are taking longer to read files, they're waiting for more data, and they're leaving more seats open later. And this isn't just my opinion. This is exactly what schools did for the last few years. Decisions went out later, scholarship offers also went out later, and they keep spots open well into the spring. And that pattern has not gone away. If anything, it's become the new normal. So the truth is, a January LSAT score fits comfortably in the decision window, and a February LSAT score fits comfortably also. And so that means you are not behind. And a lot of people misunderstand the advice around applying early. Of course, applying earlier is helpful, all else being equal, but it's only helpful if your application is strong. And the thing is that all else typically is not equal. So if you're choosing between applying in November with a weaker score or applying in February with a stronger score, the stronger score applying later wins every single time. Law schools do not reject strong applicants because they submitted in January instead of September. That is just not how this works. Your LSAT score matters a whole lot more than the timestamp on your application. Now, the January LSAT is part of the first couple years without logic games. Of course, the LSAT now just has reading comprehension and logical reasoning. And for many students, this is a major benefit. Logical reasoning is way more predictable than logic games. It's more learnable, it rewards structure, patterns, and strategy, it's less scary, and now that there are 2 scored sections of logical reasoning, any gains you make are effectively doubled. You no longer have to divide your study time 3 different ways anymore. You can focus almost entirely on argument structure and reasoning skills, and that's why people are improving more quickly than they expect. It's one of the reasons we're seeing all this LSAT score inflation. And so if you want the biggest return on your study time, you want to give most of your attention to 3 logical reasoning question types: necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. These 3 types show up constantly, and they are the backbone of logical reasoning. If you understand these well, you're going to see the patterns everywhere. And once you start seeing patterns, your improvement accelerates fast. Now, here is the #1 mistake I see students making. They wait till after the LSAT to start their applications. And this creates a huge delay because your score comes out, but you're not ready to hit submit because you still got to write your personal statement, your diversity statement, your resume, and you've got to chase down your recommenders. And suddenly a month and a half flies by. And that is what creates timing problems, not the January LSAT itself. And so the solution here is pretty simple. You want to start your essays now, edit them while you're waiting for your score, and have everything ready to go. Then when your score comes back, you're able to hit submit immediately. Now, here is a simple structure that works well for January test takers. First, you start off with the fundamentals. You learn the logical reasoning patterns, you train your inference skills, and you get comfortable with flaw types. 2, you begin timed sections earlier than you think. I know that nobody ever feels ready for timed work, but you've got to start anyway. And then, of course, you want to move into full-length timed practice tests to build your stamina, practice transitions, and understand your pacing. You also want to do deep review. That is where improvements happen. You rebuild the arguments, you explain every single wrong answer, and you ID the patterns in your misses. Then for those final 2 weeks, you're doing full practice tests, reviewing in depth, and keeping it consistent. No cramming, no overhauling your approach. And a lot of people think all their scholarship money is gone in the first half of the cycle, but it's not. The largest waves of scholarship decisions usually happen in December, January, February, and even March. So this matches perfectly with January and February LSAT scores. They're not spending their entire scholarship budget in September. That's just not how financial aid works in law schools. They keep funds available because they want strong applicants, and strong applicants often take the LSAT later. Now, between taking the LSAT and getting your score back, those 2 weeks are your chance to get ahead. You want to use that time to finalize your essays, polish your resume, double check your letters of rec, load your applications into the LSAC portal, and clean up any last minute details. That way, when your score comes back, you're able to hit submit right away. Now, the students who get the worst outcomes are usually the ones who panic and apply too early with a weak LSAT and rushed essays. In contrast, those who get the best outcomes are the ones who take their time, get a stronger score, and apply with a polished file, even if that's in February. Because applying early only helps if the rest of your application is strong. So, what you've got to remember: January is not too late, February is also not too late. The cycle has shifted later in recent years, and schools will still have seats and scholarships well into the spring, and a stronger score beats an early application every single time. So know that you are right on schedule. If you keep studying, you keep reviewing, you keep prepping your application materials, you're putting yourself in a great position for this cycle. You're not going to be behind, you're not going to be too late, and you're not going to be out of the running. You will be exactly where you need to be. And of course, you've got this. Now, for today, we're going to be covering LSAT flaw questions, going over several classic LSAT logical fallacies. I've got question number 1 pulled up here. We're going to run through it. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So number 1, at Pierce Inspector Lit, the internal review manual specifies that any matter classified as a reviewed case is automatically placed on the firm's compliance docket. Earlier this week, the compliance docket already listed a case that Mike had been working on. Harvey prepared a brief noting the docket entry and attached it to the partner review panel's file for the week. What most accurately describes the reasoning flaw in the passage? A, Mike at the compliance docket overgeneralizes from a single entry to all reviewed matters. B, Harvey at Pierce Inspector Lit infers a case was reviewed solely from its compliance docket status. C, Harvey, before the partner review panel, ignores possible exceptions explicitly allowed in the internal review manual. Or D, Mike, within Pierce Inspector Lit, equivocates on reviewed case between informal feedback and formal designation. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. This one's a little bit wordier, a little bit tougher than some we've done recently. And so if it takes you a bit longer, of course, totally cool. I've tried to draw a contrast, a compromise here between wordier, tougher arguments and still keeping it a little bit fun with the pop culture references. But I see folks are getting it. Awesome. I see Justin and Michael Osvaldo all saying B as in Bravo. B as in Bravo, in fact, of course, is correct. Well done. Giovanna also got it. Fantastic. This is a classic logical fallacy. All they're doing here is reversing necessary and sufficient conditions. B, of course, calls that out. So you want to look at the conditional statement, and then you see, well, they are inferring from the necessary that the sufficient must have happened, which, of course, is not necessarily the case. Well done. On to number 2. During a routine check, the Harvard Law Admissions Panel confirmed that no applicant meeting the dual track criteria had been flagged for any curriculum exception this cycle. However, Professor Stromwell noted that at least one dual track applicant had simultaneously been placed in the advocacy rotation. Vivian logged these findings in the curriculum office's tracking system for further classification. What most accurately describes the reasoning flaw in the passage? A, Professor Stromwell at the Harvard Law Admissions Panel overgeneralizes from one dual track case to all applicants. B, Vivian in the curriculum office treats the advocacy rotation as a guaranteed cause of curriculum exceptions. C, Professor Stromwell, working with the curriculum office, equivocates between dual track criteria and curriculum exceptions. Or D, Vivian in the curriculum office infers a particular applicant's advocacy rotation status without sufficient evidential support. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I see some folks starting to drop answers in. Awesome. I'll give you all another minute if you need it. If you're not sure, of course, just drop a question mark, but let us know where you stand. So we have this outcome here that Vivian has chosen to log the findings for further clarification. Now, is there anything backing that? Is there any support for her to be doing that? We know that nobody meeting the dual track criteria has been flagged for curriculum exceptions. Then Stromwell notes that someone's been placed in the advocacy rotation. That doesn't kick anything off. There's nothing we can infer on the basis of that. And so there's no support for Vivian to be doing anything here. So that's why the answer is D as in Delta. Giovanna, Justin, Michael, Passion, all saying D. Unique saying D. Fantastic. Well done. I see someone chose B as in Bravo here. That's saying that Vivian's treating the advocacy rotation as a guaranteed cause of curriculum exceptions. We don't know that she's doing that. That's kind of like accusing the argument of a mistaken reversal, but that's not actually what's happening in this case. She's logging the findings without support to do so. So that's why it's D. Well done, folks. On to number 3. At HHM, the chain of custody protocol states that any case meeting the required documentation threshold must be cleared by the evidence review board before proceeding. Kim submitted an update showing that Jimmy's case lacked the initial documentation required for threshold status. Howard forwarded the update to the evidence review board so they could record the missing materials in their evaluative log. What most accurately describes the flaw? A, Jimmy's reasoning at HHM infers clearance merely because the case fails to meet the chain of custody threshold. B, Kim, citing the chain of custody protocol, overgeneralizes from one documentation issue to all HHM cases. C, Howard at the review board ignores alternative explanations for missing documents in Jimmy's case file. Or D, Jimmy, relying on the chain of custody protocol, equivocates between preliminary notes and required documentation. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. And it helps, by the way, to try and pre-phrase or predict the flaw for yourself, to articulate it for yourself before looking at the choices. That way you have your own sense of the flaw in your own words, and it's easier to spot the articulation of the flaw in the choices. So we know from the first sentence, we have the conditional statement saying, if it meets the threshold, then it must be cleared. So threshold, then cleared. And then what are they inferring from that, right? Then we have Kim submitting an update showing that Jimmy's case lacked the threshold. It did not meet the threshold. So we can't infer anything on that. They're denying the sufficient condition. We have sufficient requires necessary. If we lack the sufficient, we cannot infer anything because we are not kicking off the conditional statement, and there's nothing we can infer on that basis. This one's a little bit trickier. I see folks are having trouble with it. So if I were to articulate the conditional as a concrete statement here, threshold, arrow cleared, we learn that Kim is telling us that Jimmy's case did not meet the threshold. and then Howard goes ahead and forwards it. The issue here is that Howard did not have basis to do anything. We have no information regarding what should happen with the case if it does not meet the threshold. And so for this reason, the best answer here is choice A. Jimmy's reasoning infers clearance merely because the case fails to meet the chain of custody threshold. It's not meeting the threshold, and so there's nothing we can infer on that basis. I see a lot of folks here are choosing C, that Howard ignores alternative explanations for missing documents. We know that Howard's doing something, and maybe he shouldn't be doing anything, but is he ignoring alternative explanations for missing documents? We don't know that. So I see unique got A. A is in fact correct. It's inferring clearance because the case fails to meet the threshold when we can't say anything on that basis. Is that making sense to folks? So the answer is A, because A is describing the problem with negating the sufficient condition. In formal logic terms, this is called denying the antecedent because the antecedent is the sufficient condition before the arrow. And to negate the sufficient, you cannot infer anything. If the sufficient condition is not met, it doesn't allow us to infer anything at all. Go on to number 4. Within the archive division, one report indicated that at least one file had been tagged for cross-index earlier in the quarter. A separate report from the T-class audit unit documented that at least one file, possibly unrelated, had been marked for archival audit. The clearance review section compiled both reports to maintain accurate logs for subsequent verification steps. What most describes the flaw? A, the archive division's reasoning overgeneralizes from one cross-index report to all files in the clearance review section. B, the T-class audit unit treats archival audit status as a guaranteed cause of cross-index tagging. C, the clearance review section treats separate existence reports as if they guaranteed one file satisfied both conditions. Or D, the archive division's reasoning ignores that changing procedures in the T-class audit unit could explain the reports. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I see some folks are dropping in the chat. Awesome. I know these are a bit tougher, but yeah, we're getting there. This is closer to what the difficulty level you're going to see on LSAT test day relative to those that we've been doing recently. So I would level up the difficulty since you all said they were too easy. Be careful what you wish for. So the flaw here, if we just look at the passage here, we have at least one file tagged for cross-index earlier. We have at least one file possibly unrelated marked for archival audit, and they're compiling both. But they're potentially two separate files, and they're lumping them together. We can't assume that, so choice C as in Charlie articulates that problem. I see Giovanna, Justin, Osvaldo, Michael all got it. The answer is in fact choice C as in Charlie. Well done, a bit tricky. That's assuming they are the same report meeting both, when of course they could be two separate reports. 6, at Pierce Inspector Lit, the compliance manual states that any case file carrying a Tier 1 compliance badge in the docketing system is automatically placed on the mandatory partner review calendar managed by the compliance committee. This quarter, Donna notes that a particular cross-border acquisition file has already been placed on the mandatory partner review calendar. On that basis, Harvey informs the managing partner group that this acquisition file must carry a Tier 1 compliance badge in the docketing system. What describes the flaw? A, Harvey assumes the compliance committee's involvement proves Pierce Inspector Lit caused regulators' concerns. B, Harvey treats being on the partner review calendar as guaranteeing a Tier 1 badge. C, Harvey generalizes from this single acquisition file to all matters on the partner review calendar. Or D, Harvey infers this acquisition file matches other Tier 1 matters merely because Donna noticed it. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. So we have from the first sentence here, any case file carrying Tier 1 compliance is automatically placed on the mandatory partner review calendar. So if Tier 1 compliance badge then placed on the calendar. Then we learn something's been placed on the calendar. We should not infer that it has the Tier 1 compliance badge because that's going backwards on the arrow, confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, lining up with B as in Bravo. I see Anne, Osvaldo, Michael all saying B as in Bravo. B is in fact correct. Well done. Awesome. On to number 7. The Harvard Law Curriculum Office has tracked recent enrollment patterns and found that sections of Professor Stromwell's trial advocacy seminar, which students like Elle and Vivian routinely fill to capacity, coincide with sharp increases in applications to the trial prep clinic in the same term. Relying on these internal curriculum reports, the office advises this registrar that high enrollment in Professor Stromwell's seminar is what produces the surge in student demand for the trial prep clinic. What describes the flaw? A, the curriculum office assumes Vivian's course that boosts trial prep applications is required for upper division registration. B, the curriculum office improperly generalizes from a few enthusiastic students in Stromwell's seminar to all Harvard applicants. C, the curriculum office treats limited internal data about Elle and Vivian as proving no other factors influence demand. Or D, the curriculum office treats Elle's seminar enrollment coinciding with trial prep applications as proving the seminar causes demand. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So the key word here is coincide. It appears in the third line. The enrollment patterns coincide with sharp increases in applications. So sections fill to capacity, and that coincides with applications to the clinic in the same term. Therefore, they are assuming that high enrollment is what produces the surge. That enrollment in the seminar causes the surge in demand for the clinic because they coincide, they coexist. But just because they occur at the same time or they coincide does not necessarily mean that one causes the other. And so this is a classic correlation causation fallacy. D as in Delta is in fact correct. Well done. I see Courtney, Osvaldo, Michael, Giovanna all saying D as in Delta. D is in fact correct. Well done. I see that some folks are choosing C as in Charlie, saying that no other factors cause demand or influence demand, but they're not saying this is the only factor that causes demand, but they're saying high enrollment is producing the surge. So D as in Delta is the best articulation of a classic correlation causation fallacy. But it's not that there's limited internal data, as if the data is not sufficient. It's reasonable amount of data, but they're assuming that because they coexist, that therefore one causes the other, when maybe it's a coincidence or maybe there's a third factor. I could see why C is tempting though, but the data is not unfairly or too limited. On to number 8. HHM's case intake committee observes that both the Mesa Verde file, Jimmy managed, and the regional bank file recently reviewed by Kim are tagged in the firm's trust account monitoring system for duplicate withdrawal patterns. Each matter appears in the internal dashboard with the same duplicate withdrawal alert. Because both files carry that identical monitoring tag, Howard tells the disciplinary review panel that the two matters must be treated as equivalent in all material respects when deciding whether to open a formal misconduct investigation. What describes the flaw? A, Howard treats two HHM files sharing a duplicate withdrawal tag as equivalent in all relevant misconduct respects. B, Howard assumes the trust account monitoring system's alert proves Jimmy actually caused improper withdrawals in both matters. C, Howard generalizes from the Mesa Verde file to conclude all bank matters justify disciplinary investigations. Or D, Howard infers from limited dashboard data that no further inquiry by the disciplinary review panel is necessary. So when you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So they say that because both files carry that same monitoring tag, they should be treated as equivalent in all material respects. But just because they're alike in one particular way doesn't mean they're similar in all other ways. So this lines up with the idea of overgeneralization. which of course is choice A. They share a duplicate tag equivalent in all relevant misconduct respects. So A is the answer. Well done. Michael, Anne, Osvaldo, Courtney, Yannick, Rob, all saying A. A is in fact correct. Happy to walk through any of the choices and if anybody found anything else tempting here, but this is essentially overgeneralization is the best way to describe this one. On to number 9, if not. An internal report from the archive division states that every account the portfolio unit classifies as an elevated risk exposure has failed the most recent documentation audit conducted under the Central Registry standards. In its latest briefing, the clearance board notes that account 74K is listed by the portfolio unit as an elevated risk exposure. On the basis of these internal classifications, the risk director reports that all accounts recorded in the Central Registry have failed the most recent documentation audit. What's the flaw? A, the risk director treats being labeled an elevated risk exposure as required for failing the documentation audit in the Central Registry. B, the risk director assumes the portfolio unit's classification directly causes every account's failure in the documentation audit within the Central Registry. C, the risk director generalizes from elevated risk exposures failing the documentation audit to all accounts in the Central Registry. Or D, the risk director infers from limited archive division records that no accounts have passed any documentation audit under the Central Registry. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So we have evidence here about the accounts classified as being in elevated risk exposure and that those have failed. And because those have failed, all accounts recorded have failed. But we've got evidence regarding only a limited subset that may not represent the whole. Specifically, these are the ones that are classified as elevated risk exposure. We cannot necessarily generalize to all on that basis. And so they are overgeneralizing, going beyond the scope based on the evidence. And so choice C as in Charlie best describes that flaw of overgeneralization. So that is in fact the answer, choice C. And Giovanna, Osvaldo, Courtney, Rob's all saying C. C is in fact correct. Well done. On to number 10. During a billing review of the Northbridge litigation, the document review unit at Pearson Spector Lit has not located any internal emails, time entry annotations, or audit flags indicating that Lewis instructed associates to alter their recorded hours on that matter. After receiving the unit's summary of the billing audit, Jessica reports to the firm's management committee that Lewis did not direct anyone to change any time entries on the Northbridge case. What describes the flaw? A, Jessica assumes the document review unit's involvement proves Lewis caused every discrepancy in the Northbridge invoices at Pearson Spector Lit. B, Jessica treats the billing audit's failure to find instructions as showing Lewis gave none at Pearson Spector Lit. C, Jessica improperly generalizes from the Northbridge litigation to all matters handled by Lewis at Pearson Spector Lit. Or D, Jessica assumes that if Lewis had ordered changes, the billing review unit would necessarily have documented them. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So evidence here, Jessica has not been able to find anything. Therefore, it must not have occurred. This is our classic absence of evidence flaw, assuming that a lack of evidence means that nothing ever actually happened, that a lack of evidence proves nothing ever actually happened, when, of course, it's possible that something did happen. She just is not able to find the evidence, but it may exist. So B as in Bravo is in fact the answer. I see Anne, Michael, Giovanna, Yannick, Courtney, Osvaldo, all saying B as in Bravo. B as in Bravo is in fact correct. Well done, folks. We're 10 in so far. Out of these first 10, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Let us know where you stand in terms of your overall accuracy here. And by the way, folks, if you're looking for support on your LSAT prep journey, you're looking for a bit of help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. And so if you'd like some help, you can book it through the link in the chat below this video, unpluggedprep.com/start. Link in my bio on TikTok. I'm happy to help you all out. I see that Osvaldo got 7 for 10. Awesome. Well done. I know these were a little bit trickier than usual. Passion saying 1 for 10. Passion, hang in there. These are really hard. Well done. Passion says I'm reading hecka slow today. It's okay. These are pretty brutal questions here overall. I've been trying to level up the difficulty significantly. And so if you're having trouble with these, you're definitely not alone. On to number 11. At Pearson Specter Lit, Harvey and Donna noted in their internal compliance memo that every file carries a Tier 1 compliance badge that must also require partner level review according to the firm's ethics committee guidelines. They further observed that one of Lewis's current case files requires partner level review. Based on this, they concluded that this file carries a Tier 1 compliance badge. What's the flaw? A, Donna and Lewis infer firm-wide ethics standards from a few files briefly reviewed by the ethics committee. B, Harvey assumes the ethics committee's partner level review causes files to receive Tier 1 compliance badges in every case. C, Harvey and Donna treat partner level review at Pearson Specter Lit as sufficient for a Tier 1 compliance badge. Or D, Harvey and Donna conclude a file lacks a Tier 1 badge merely because ethics committee notes do not mention one. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Commit now so that you know where you stand and that you, of course, you get it wrong now so that you don't get it wrong on test day ideally. So we have a conditional. Every file with a badge also requires review. We've got something requiring review, therefore it must have the badge. Mistaken reversal, confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, deeply flawed for that reason. So C as in Charlie tells us they're treating review as sufficient when, of course, it was only necessary. So C as in Charlie is in fact the answer. Well done. Osvaldo, Michael, Courtney, Yannick, and Giovanna all saying C. C is in fact correct. Well done. On to number 12. In a curriculum office briefing, Professor Stromwell and L reviewed a data set showing that certain courses that qualify for upper division registration frequently also count toward trial preparation credits. The admissions panel noted that Warner is enrolled in one such course exhibiting both features. From this, they concluded that the fact a course counts toward trial preparation credits is what causes that course to qualify for upper division registration. What's the flaw? A, Professor Stromwell generalizes on about all Harvard Law courses from a single data set of jointly credited classes. B, the admissions panel, relying on L's briefing, treats trial preparation credits as the cause of upper division status. C, Warner assumes that because some Harvard Law courses earn trial preparation credits, only those can qualify for upper division registration. Or D, the admissions panel concludes that no course meets trial preparation credits merely because L's curriculum office lacks contrary documentation. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So I see some folks dropping an answer in the chat here. The answer is in fact choice B. Well done. Michael, Giovanna, Courtney, and Osvaldo all saying B as in Bravo. Unique saying B as in Bravo as well. Fantastic. They're treating the credits as the cause of upper division status when we just don't have the support for that. We know that certain ones that qualify for upper division frequently also count towards trial preparation credits, but can we assume a causal relationship here? We don't know. And yeah, if the flawed question, you can just count that one, Giovanna. Yeah. On to number 13. At HHM, Jimmy and Kim reviewed 2 case files for the disciplinary board. One file was marked with an evidence grade yellow flag and had been designated as subject to heightened evidentiary review. Another file was scheduled for chain of custody audit and was likewise designated as subject to heightened evidentiary review, they concluded that both files must therefore be similar in all relevant respects beyond the shared category noted by the Evidence Review Committee. What's the flaw? A, Jimmy assumes the Evidence Review Committee's designation of heightened review actually causes both files' underlying evidentiary weaknesses. B, Kim treats HHM's change of custody audit as required whenever a file receives an evidence grade yellow flag designation. C, Jimmy and Kim generalize for the disciplinary board from these two files to all HHM evidence practices. Or D, Jimmy and Kim infer for the disciplinary board broad similarity from files sharing heightened evidentiary review status. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So I see some folks dropping an answer in the chat. Read the answer choice fully. Sometimes the choice is half good, but in the second half, it goes a little bit off the rails. You want to be really careful to make sure that the choice is valid in all respects, fully describing the flaw in the passage. So yes, of course, they are generalizing from these two files, but what are they inferring? What specifically are they generalizing here? Are they generalizing to all HHM practices, or are they generalizing they're similar in all respects? Because both files are similar in one way, they're similar in all other ways. So C is tempting, but it's not correct. The answer is in fact D as in Delta. I see Osvaldo and Michael, Courtney all saying D as in Delta. D is in fact correct. Well done, pretty tricky. So again, they are overgeneralizing, but in a particular way. So D is correct. Awesome, Giovanna got it as well. So that's the answer, D, not C, although C is tempting. On to number 14. An internal bulletin from the archive division noted that it is possible that any document that has a level A clearance tag might thereby fall under a T-class audit procedure according to recent guidance from the clearance board. A reviewer cited one document under discussion and concluded that in this case, the presence of the A-level clearance tag definitely ensures it falls under the T-class audit procedure. What's the flaw? A, the archive division treats a possible link between level A tags and T-class audits as definitely established. B, the clearance board generalizes from a single document to all materials bearing level A clearance tags across the archive division. C, the clearance board assumes the T-class audit procedure itself causes documents to receive A-level A clearance tags in future reviews. Or D, the archive division concludes the document lacks T-class audit obligations because the clearance board has not yet issued written guidance. When you got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So evidence says it is possible that any document with the tag might fall under the procedure. Then they're concluding that because they have the tag, it will definitely fall under the procedure. So confusing a could for a must, a possible for a definite. Choice A lines up with that and describes the flaw, treating a possible link as being definitely established. Again, confusing could for must. I saw some folks chose B as in Bravo, but they are not assuming that it applies to all materials. Their conclusion is still limited to this particular one, this particular document. So B might be tempting because there is a certain overgeneralization here. They're going too extreme, too far beyond the scope, but it's confusing could for must. So A, in fact, is actually correct. I see Anne and Osvaldo both got it. Fantastic. A is the answer on this one. On to number 15. During a review session at Pearson Specter Lit, Jessica and Mike evaluated a very small set of case files that trigger ethics screen protocol under the merger review panel's procedures. In this limited set, each file had received a positive compliance notation. From this, they concluded in their memo that all case files that trigger ethics screen protocol throughout the firm must similarly receive a positive compliance notation regardless of which department filed them. What describes the flaw? A, Mike assumes merger review panel ethics screen protocol is required for any file with a positive compliance notation. B, Jessica treats receiving a positive compliance notation as causing files to trigger the ethics screen protocol at Pearson Spectre Lit. C, Jessica and Mike generalize from a tiny set of ethics screen files to all Pearson Spectre Lit matters. Or D, Jessica and Mike conclude some departments lack compliant files merely because merger review panel records omit explicit positive notations. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So note in the beginning, they tell us that they evaluated a very small set of case files. Then they concluded that all case files must have those same characteristics. So in short, confusing a small sample and saying it must therefore be generalized to the whole. So it's a part to whole flaw, unrepresentative sample. So choice C as in Charlie is in fact correct. Unique, Giovanna, Courtney, Anne, Passion, Osvaldo all saying C. C is in fact correct. Well done. Yes, of course, Giovanna notes limited, right? So it's a limited set, not necessarily representative. Well done. We're 15 in so far, folks. Out of these 15, please drop in the chat how many you got right. Out of the number that you did, let us know where you stand. And by the way, folks, if you find these classes helpful, we do them every single weekday at this same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube and TikTok. If you want to catch the recordings of all the previous classes, they're all on the YouTube channel under the courses tab on the channel homepage. If you find this helpful, please do spread the word as well. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these classes, and the algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so please spread the word, share the link on your socials. The more this grows over time, the more I will expand it over time and keep running these classes for all of you. I see that Courtney's 9 for 10, Giovanna's 11 for 15, Passion's 3 for 15. I know today's a rough day for you, Passion, but it's okay. We'll get better. You keep showing up. You will improve over time. So just keep doing the work. On to number 16. At Pearson Spectre Lit, the Ethics Committee's policy states that any client matter the committee designates for Tier 1 scrutiny is automatically placed on the expedited ethics calendar. Donna notes that one corporate matter in Mike's queue is already on the expedited ethics calendar. On that basis, Harvey concludes in his memo to the Ethics Committee that this matter must have been designated for Tier 1 scrutiny as well. What describes the flaw? A, Harvey overgeneralizes from a single corporate matter to Pearson Spectre Lit's entire Ethics Committee policy. B, Harvey infers at Pearson Spectre Lit that ethics calendar status guarantees prior Tier 1 designation. C, Harvey ignores the possibility that Donna misread the expedited ethics calendar maintained by the committee. Or D, Harvey treats the Ethics Committee's Tier 1 policy as if it applied only to Mike's matters. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. And of course, note we have a conditional statement. Anything designated for Tier 1 scrutiny is automatically on the calendar. So if scrutiny, then calendar. Then we learn something's on the calendar. Therefore, they conclude it must have the scrutiny. We don't know that. It's confusing. Necessary and sufficient conditions and improper reversal around the arrow. That is invalid, of course. And so B as in Bravo notes the confusion of necessary and sufficient conditions. So B is in fact the answer. Well done. I see Giovanna, Unique, Passion, Anne, Courtney, Michael, Osvaldo all saying B as in Bravo. B is in fact correct. Well done. I see, by the way, Osvaldo's 12 for 15. Courtney's 9 for 10. Awesome, folks. Anne's asking Thanksgiving. And so, no, we are not running class on Thanksgiving, of course. We should all be spending time with our families, whether we want to or not, but we're not going to have class that day. But instead of class that day, we're going to do an all-day live stream on Wednesday for the November LSAT score release. Instead of our normal time that day, it's going to start at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be going for at least a couple hours, doing some drill sets, doing some lessons, helping out those who took November LSAT and planning, of course, for the January and February LSATs going forward. On to number 17. The Harvard Law Curriculum Office has confirmed that no single course simultaneously counts as a first-year core requirement and as credit within the advanced trial preparation program. Later, Professor Stromwell circulates a note that at least one first-year core course is also designated as an advocacy module seminar. On the basis of that note, Vivian tells the trial prep program coordinator that at least one advocacy module seminar must count toward the advanced trial preparation credits. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. A, Vivian improperly generalizes from one curriculum office note to all Harvard Law trial prep requirements. B, Professor Stromwell assumes every advocacy module seminar automatically counts toward the advanced trial preparation program at Harvard Law. C, Vivian treats the trial prep program coordinator's notice as overturning the curriculum office's standing requirements. Or D, Vivian's reasoning concludes a course earns advanced trial prep credit despite Harvard Law policy forbidding such overlap. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I'll give folks a minute. This one's a little bit tricky. So we have here in this passage a policy in the first sentence telling us that no single course can both count as a first-year core requirement and also as credit for the advanced program. Then they're saying that we have at least one course that is designated as the other, but of course we can't give the credits, right? That would be a violation. Then we have Vivian telling the coordinator at least one must count. When we know based on the policy, it could not count. So is she overturning or treating it as overturning? Not necessarily, but she is, of course, in violation of the policy. So her conclusion, her course of action, goes against the Harvard Law Curriculum Office policy. So for that reason, D as in Delta actually describes the problem with her reasoning. She's concluding that she should get credit even though the policy does not allow that. So is she overturning it? Not necessarily, but is she acting in accordance with it? Of course not. She's violating it. So D as in Delta best describes it. I see here Yannick, Osvaldo, Michael all saying D as in Delta. D is in fact correct. Well done, folks. Hard one. C is tempting, of course, but again, overturning is too strong here. We're only knowing what she's doing in this particular case, and of course that it's a violation of the policy. Cool. Okay, number 18. An internal HHM protocol specifies that any client complaint categorized by the risk unit as a level 3 malpractice exposure is immediately forwarded to the disciplinary board for preliminary review. Kim learns that a recent complaint involving Jimmy's handling of retainer funds has not been forwarded to the disciplinary board at all. In her summary to the HHM partners, Chuck concludes that this particular complaint must have been categorized as a level 3 malpractice exposure under the firm's risk procedures. What's the flaw? A, Chuck infers level 3 malpractice exposure from the complaints not reaching the HHM disciplinary board. B, Chuck overgeneralizes from one complaint to all malpractice exposures handled by HHM's disciplinary board. C, Chuck treats Kim's report as overriding the HHM risk unit's written protocol on malpractice categories. Or D, Chuck overlooks the possibility that the complaint might later be forwarded to the disciplinary board. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I'll give folks a minute since this one's a bit tougher. All right, see, folks were initially having some trouble, but ultimately got it. Yes, the answer is in fact A. Chuck is inferring level 3 malpractice exposure from the complaint not reaching the board. Of course, we know from the conditional, if it's level 3, then it's forwarded. This was not forwarded, so we should say not level 3, right? And he's saying it is level 3, doesn't make any sense, of course. So A is in fact the answer. Well done. Osvaldo, Michael, Unique all saying A. Well done. On to number 19. A quarterly report from the archive division notes that at least one case file in the central repository is currently logged as a missing documentation matter. A separate notice from the T-class audit unit indicates that at least one case file has been flagged for anomaly review under the unit's standard protocol. On the basis of these two memoranda, the clearance review section concludes that at least one specific case file is both a missing documentation matter and flagged for anomaly review. What's the flaw? A, the clearance review section overgeneralizes from one archive division report to all files in the central repository. B, it treats the clearance review section memorandum as overturning established procedures of the archive division and T-class audit unit. C, it assumes the archive division report and T-class audit unit notice concern the same case file. Or D, it overlooks that archive division cases and T-class audit unit anomaly reviews may concern entirely different files. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So we have in the beginning, there's at least one case file logged as missing. Separately, we know at least one case file is flagged for anomaly review, and then they're assuming overlap. But of course, we don't know whether there's overlap or not, because those could be two separate files for all we know. We don't know if they're the same file. And the argument's assuming they are the same case file, which of course, choice C articulates that flaw, saying they are the same case file when we can't say that. So C is, of course, the answer. Well done. Osvaldo, Michael, Giovanna, all saying C. C is in fact correct. Well done, folks. On to number 20. Pearson Spector Lit's conflicts policy states that any client listed by the conflicts desk as an active merger client cannot at the same time be classified as adverse to the firm before a regulatory tribunal. Lewis notes that at least one ongoing regulatory matter is currently adverse to the firm and is also listed on Jessica's strategic priority docket. In a briefing to the Merger Review Board, Harvey concludes that at least one strategic priority matter involves a client classified as an active merger client. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. Choice A, what's the flaw? Lewis overgeneralizes from one regulatory matter to all cases on Jessica's strategic priority docket at Pearson Spector Lit. B, Harvey assumes a strategic priority matter involves an active merger client, despite Pearson Spector Lit conflicts policy forbidding overlap. C, Harvey misreads the conflicts desk policy as applying only to clients already adverse before the regulatory tribunal. Or D, Harvey overlooks the possibility that Lewis misidentified the regulatory matter status on Jessica's strategic priority docket. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So Harvey is concluding that at least one strategic matter involves a client classified as an active merger client, when earlier they tell us that that any client listed as an active merger client cannot be adverse to the firm before a regulatory tribunal. So the rule earlier ultimately leads to a mutual exclusion, saying there cannot be overlap, and Harvey's concluding that there is overlap. Impossible, of course. So B as in Bravo reflects the problem with Harvey's assumption there, assuming overlap when it is prohibited. So B as in Bravo is in fact the answer. I see Osvaldo, Michael, Giovanna, Unique all saying B as in Bravo. B is in fact correct, folks. Well done. We're 20 questions in so far, folks. Out of these 20, please drop in the chat how many you got right. Out of the number that you did, let us know where you stand so we can adjust difficulty going forward. And by the way, folks, if you're looking for support with your LSAT prep, whenever you're taking, whether it's in January, February, April, June, or beyond, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this now or later. You can book your free private one-on-one call with me via Zoom at unpluggedprep.com/start. link below the video on YouTube, link in my bio on TikTok, of course. Feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to help you all out. We're resuming again Monday, free class, same time, same place. Wednesday, of course, we're changing it up for November LSAT score release. We'll be starting in the morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be going at least all morning, doing drill sets, doing classes, lessons, information on retake prep, and January, February LSAT prep, of course. I'll be happy to help you all out. Looking forward to seeing you Wednesday. But of course, before that, Monday, folks, have a great weekend. I'll see you all next week. Have a good one. Take care.